It's time for the BSing with the Guys live podcast.
So let me formally introduce the audience to Rob. Now, Rob's been killing it in television for over 30 years. He started as an Emmy-winning producer at KCBS in LA, doing hard news, and then became an on-air correspondent. Now, he is the guy who created and ran Reasonable Doubt, which is streaming on Max right now, if I'm not mistaken. And also executive produced and directed The Dead Files for all 15 seasons. That's a long run, Rob.
That was a really long run. Doesn't happen anymore.
No, and I know you made the fun nostalgia series titled The Infomercials That Sold Us with Dennis Miller on Fox Nation.
Correct.
So, honestly, I think we'd be here all night if I just kept going through your resume. So what I really want to talk to you about is this book coming out titled Crimes of Omission, Distorted Justice, the Media's War on Truth. So that's exactly what we're going to get into. Rob, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me here.
Yep. So let's get right to it, man. Now, the book you have coming out, it's basically a hard-hitting, I guess, critique of how mainstream journalism shifted from objective reporting to activism. So, what finally made you say, I guess, screw it, I'm writing this book after 30 years in the game? I mean, was there one moment or one case that just pushed you over the edge?
I think, I do it through the lens of the anti-police movement. So the book starts with Trayvon Martin, 2012, and follows some of the high-profile cases all the way up to George Floyd in 2020. And I contrast the entire story, just a matter of public record and court documents and transcripts with what the media actually reported. And really the premise of the book is it wasn't that the media lied. It was that the media told you what they wanted to tell you. So the crimes were the crimes of what they didn't cover, the couple facts that they didn't mention, the context that they didn't put into these stories. And if you ask about an inciting incident, I think December of 2020, I had been steeped in working on the criminal justice system. And when they did get it wrong with Reasonable Doubt, we were looking at possible wrongful murder convictions and watching what the misreporting had led to, which was just watching the country burn and watching us really, for the first time in my lifetime, where it didn't seem that crazy to think maybe we are on the brink of a split. And I felt like a lot of that had to go on the feet of the journalists, because if we don't share a reality about what's going on, whether it's policing or climate change or you name the issue, if we're all living in our own silos, there's no way that the differences are going to remain irreconcilable. And I think journalism is really the one profession that's supposed to be the umpire, the one that's calling the balls and strikes, that has no stake in the game and is holding a mirror up to reality. And I think we're falling short.
Well, definitely. We've watched it change over the past few years and especially once Trump came into play. But that's a totally different story. Now, I guess these left out, so to say, facts, I mean, they have to have done more damage than anything that the media actually said. You know what I mean? I know what they said wasn't good a lot of times in these big stories like the Trayvon Martins, but to me, it's what they left out did more damage than anything.
Well, yeah, and that's the premise of the book. So
Yeah.
I think, if you take something like Trayvon Martin, which was really an interesting case, and I try to write this really like a true crime novel. So I try to take you, how did Trayvon Martin end up in that face-to-face confrontation with George Zimmerman that day, and what were their backgrounds, and how do they end up in that confrontation? There was so much to this story, and it was complex, and it was left out, but every step of the way, it was really sort of pushed from the perspective of Benjamin Crump, who was the family's attorney. Law enforcement was sort of put in the back burner. I think in the past, news probably had a bias where they really did use their law enforcement sources, maybe too much. But now it was really the opposite. And the narrative was driven very much by the activists, by the family's attorney. And even when you had a jury, it was just a jury of 6. I think it was all women, actually, come to think of it. And even when you had a jury that acquitted George Zimmerman, there wasn't even a moment of thinking like, well, maybe we got this story wrong. Maybe there was more to it. Maybe we should go back and look at what was presented in the trial. It just went from 0 to 100 to, well, that just proves, it was like circular reasoning. That just proves the system's broken. There was no justice for Trayvon Martin.
Yeah, it almost, I don't know, it's like the media just became these activists to where it's kind of like in their mind the ends justifies the means. Like they know what they're doing. They just hide behind this virtuous just I guess they feel like, hey, we're doing a good job because we disagree with whatever's going on. So now they look at it like it's their job to push a certain narrative. And I don't know if it's that innocent with them or if there's something bigger driving that. But you do see a lot of it where I've heard them basically say, just talking to people, that I feel like it's okay to omit certain things if it's pushing a narrative or a cause that I believe in. And to me, that's not journalism. You're not supposed to be up there pushing causes, so to say. You're just giving the information, let the public decide, is what it used to be.
So I think what's happening is the process has inverted itself. So journalists now start with an endpoint. They believe, for example, in the anti-police movement of the 2010s, that it was just sort of a given that there was this problem, an issue of systemic racism with the justice system in the United States. We're having an important moment of reckoning. And so because they started with the conclusion, you end up working backwards. Now you're cherry picking facts, you're cherry picking cases, you're eliminating things that do not support that premise. And so you're no longer doing journalism, now it's activism. And I mean, I think the fun part about investigative journalism is if you start off with an open mind, maybe you start off thinking that you're going to do a story about how this bad company is polluting the waters, and maybe it turns into something completely different. You're open, you're letting the facts lead you to a conclusion. But I think what's started to happen is they're working backwards. And
Right.
that's a corrupting influence. But I will say I don't think a lot of people entertain conspiracy theories. I would just tell you, as someone who's been in it, as someone who's talked to a lot of people, I don't think it's I don't think it's all that. I think it is there's some arrogance. There's a lot of people who are in this business live in blue bubbles, and so that's all they know. And so I think, like everyone else, I think they feel like they're doing an important service, but they've lost track. Their North Star should be truth. It's not social justice. If you want to do social justice, then go be an activist.
Of course. Do you think? I mean, do you think it changes at all, or do you think we're just stuck in this way with the mainstream media now?
I do have some optimism that it can change because I think that ultimately, look, we're still in a capitalist system and eyeballs rule. And Fox News Channel, MS Now, they're doing pretty well doing what they're doing. So I don't expect them to change. But if you look at the legacy networks, if you look at CNN, if you look at the newspapers, they're dying. And so right now they're doubling down on a losing strategy. I think ultimately, uh, we're seeing it at CBS, maybe with Barry Weiss. I think that ultimately there's going to be some kind of a movement with, we've lost the trust of the public. We've got to get it back.
Right. Well, I'm with you. There's just so much money when it comes to these big media outlets that it seems like whatever they're doing hasn't cut into their bottom line enough, apparently, because they continue to do it. And it's on both sides. I mean, it's not like it's just one sided when it comes to this political narratives that they push, but it does seem to be, as you mentioned, this blue bubble, and I just didn't know if that was coming from, pressure from bosses or basically people being afraid to be called, say, racist when it comes to the George Floyd cases and the Trayvon Martins, if everybody's trying to be on the right side of history, so to say, or if there's someone above them saying, this is what we need to push and you don't worry about why.
No, I think it's a little bit of all the above, except for the last one. I think,
Right.
you look, newsrooms in the old days of journalism, like, broadcast news isn't that. I started in November of 91 at a San Diego TV station. And as I was coming into the business as sort of a young Gen Xer, and, we were the MTV generation and we were going to destroy the
Mhm.
business, the older generation, that first wave of TV news people were starting to retire. And so I got to meet some of them and learn from them. And I think that the big difference that you would see is those first wave of TV news people were blue collar guys. Most of them didn't finish college. Walter Cronkite never finished college. And these were guys who were hard scrabble. They didn't have to try to figure out their audience, they were the audience. And the things that worried them, that concerned their families, were the kind of things that they did stories with. And they weren't afraid to hold truth to power. They would take on politicians, they would take on they took on whoever, they took on corruption. That's the
Yeah.
role that a journalist is supposed to take. The
Yes.
business has gotten very precious now. So if you go into a typical big city newsroom or legacy newsroom, almost all college graduates, almost all from very elite university. Most of the people came from middle class, upper middle class, or wealthy backgrounds. And so there's a sameness, a monoculture to it, and they are trying to understand an audience that they really have no connection to anymore.
Sounds like you're saying there's
Good
no
point.
diversity when that's all they preach.
Well, yes, diversity when it came to gender or race, they have.
Right, but
Diversity when it comes to thought, like, is there somebody, are you guys broadcasting out of Louisiana? Am I saying the sign
yes.
correctly?
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
so, right. So the idea that, I don't know, somebody from Slidell, Louisiana, who understands the South and, maybe went to a small college there. I mean, there's some people like that in newsrooms, but not a lot.
Right.
And, much more likely it's someone who grew up like me in a suburb of Massachusetts and went to Boston University, and then went to J school, and then went to one of these newsrooms. So, if you looked at the percentage of people who are identify as conservative versus Democrat versus liberal, that's like 10 to 1, if
Yeah.
that.
Mm.
If you look at people who, let's say, are churchgoers, very few. So it's not that the people who are in it, I think, I'm not criticizing that world. That's a there are a lot of really smart and talented people who are in these newsrooms. But when they all think alike and they all go to the same co-ops and they all buy the same $7 coffee, they're going to think alike.
Sure.
And for them, trying to figure out what people in flyover states are interested in is, to them is, I mean, that's the way they see it. They don't really, there isn't a really hardcore understanding. Have you ever watched The Newsroom on Apple TV?
I have. Yeah.
Okay, so that's like an unintentional satire of big city newsrooms. They're not trying to. They don't realize that they're creating a satire, but the people who are in those newsrooms and the Reese Witherspoon character, who is supposed to be sort of the red state person, right?
Yeah.
She is a caricature, right?
Yeah.
There's a scene where one of the producers is having a problem with her boyfriend, who's this like international war correspondent. And he's left the house during COVID, and he comes back and she doesn't say, "Were you drinking? Did you have sex?" She said, "Did you go out and wear a mask?" It was during COVID. And he said, "No." And she's like, "Get out." Right. So they don't even,
They don't even. Yeah.
Nah.
Well, I would think too, a lot of times when you're working in places like that with those big media companies, that your job depends on thinking how everybody else around you thinks. I mean, people are probably afraid to speak out. And I mean, because if you're trying to, keep your job around people like that, it's probably a little, it's a little scary, I guess, to sit there. And if you have different opinions than what they do. So I think everybody just gets, in one way or another, you get trapped in that bubble, whether you like it or not, you're trapped in it, or you might as well find a different career. I mean,
Well, just think about any workplace, right? You have office politics. So there's a culture that's set there that kind of, every newsroom has a morning meeting where you decide the agenda for the day, where people start pitching stories. I think we should do, this story. You start to learn pretty quick what are the stories where you get sort of like a big smile and approval from the boss, and it's like, yeah, attaboy.
Sure.
And which ones you get kind of like are greeted with silence, and everybody's like, okay, anybody else have any ideas? So let's be honest. If you were at Fox News Channel and you raised your hand during the morning meeting and you said, there's a UN report that shows that climate change is having a especially big impact on communities of color, I think we should do that story. That's probably not going to
That's
do great for your career prospects. And then if you were at ABC and you said, and it was like 2014, I was looking through the website of BLM, and I don't know. I don't think they're who they say they are. I think we need to look into this. That probably is not going to go
right.
get you very far. So it never has to be written down. It never has to be spoken, but there are cultures that are created in organizations, and people are ambitious. They want to get ahead, and they understand what is expected of them.
That's kind of what we talked about a while back with all the COVID stuff that went on, that I don't think there was a memo passed around on what you can say and can't on these news stations. I'm with you. I just think it's understood. You know who you're around, the thought process around these places, and you become part of it eventually. And that's how you stay employed. But now, going back to the book, I mean, when you were researching this and writing this book, I mean, was there a moment where even you as a veteran went, I can't believe they buried that? I mean, is there anything that stands out?
Yeah, there was quite a bit. I mean, I would say I'll name a few things, but then
Yeah,
one, how rare police shooting of unarmed victims had gotten by the 2010s. That was never contextualized. Two, how only one third of the cases in that decade involved Black victims, right? If you watch the news, it seemed like it was 90% or
sure.
more. Um, but I would say the one story that probably really kind of surprised me when I was researching it was Michael Brown, because I think out of all the cases, and that was the Ferguson, Missouri one that really kickstarted the movement in 2014, I think the facts of that case were so divergent from the way it had been presented on TV that one was pretty stunning. And all anyone really has to do, if they even want to, I mean, I hopefully in a kind of entertaining true crime kind of way, I trace through what happened. But I would say that with Michael Brown, read like the even Eric Holder's Barack Obama's attorney general wrote a report on it, and they basically backed up almost entirely the Darren Wilson, the police officer's story, and that was based on the physical evidence. So there were so many myths that grew out of that. There was no hands up, don't shoot.
Sure.
Michael Brown was not shot in the back. He had been. He did lean over and punch the officer twice in the face, and he was a big kid. And then he did run away and then turn around for some strange reason and charge them. And not only that, it really seemed like from the best evidence, like he was having some sort of a psychotic break in the couple days leading up to that shooting. So it was a tragic story, but I feel like activists twisted it
Sure.
because they needed a symbol for the movement, but he wasn't the right symbol.
Well, and a lot of times it starts with just the photo that they choose to show of these people sometimes. And that's purposely done. It's no accident that they find the most friendly looking photo or young, something that was taken years before these incidents happen. So to me, it starts there, and there's no accident that
Well, the
happens.
biggest well, the biggest one is Trayvon Martin. Close
Correct.
your eyes. Anybody watching this, think, conjure up the image in your mind. That was a picture that had been taken in grade school. It was like 5 years old. In truth, Trayvon Martin was taller than George Zimmerman. George Zimmerman was way more. Um, but I think, that's subliminally pretty powerful. So if you're watching this coverage, and it was just round the clock, it was the biggest story in the year of 2012. If you're watching that coverage, it really does seem like George Zimmerman, this grown man, is assaulting a child.
Which
Who
is
went against.
exactly Yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off, but the comment that I popped up on the screen, you're answering exactly what they're asking in the chats. What does a picture have to do with it? A picture has to do a lot with it because it's the start of, I'm going to say a lie. I know you like to say the media is not really lying, but they know what they're doing. There's bad intent there. And I think that's why a picture has a lot to do with it. And if you want to expand on that, of course you can there.
Yeah, look, images are powerful. They're what makes stories. Here's the thing about that case that was really interesting. So the shooting happens, and for 3 weeks, there's no coverage. One local station there did a little bit of coverage on it. Even the local newspaper was not doing much reporting on it at all. Benjamin Crump got brought in, and he realized, because he's a smart guy, and he realized it needed an element to make it TV friendly. Right now, all you would have is a lot of talking heads back and forth, and right, some generic footage of police walking around a crime scene at the gated community. So he kept pressuring. He started a pressure campaign to make the police department release the 911 tapes that have been called by the neighbors, and also the call that Zimmerman made. To It wasn't 911 because he was working. He was a community officer. He was working with the cops, so he had a special line. But he kept pressuring the police department to release those tapes. The second he did, and he kind of worked them. I think they thought that it would make the pressure go down. The second he did, it became an explosive international story and the biggest story of the year. But it needed that element. So to the person who asked about a picture, video, those things are worth everything. The 92 riots in Los Angeles never would have happened if a guy named George Holliday, who had just been given a video camera for his birthday, didn't see some kind of activity across the street and went out on his balcony and started shooting the Rodney King beating. Without that video, it would have been, nobody would have known about that story.
Such a good point. Very good point.
It is.
Yeah, that's it, and how that can, I guess, go over somebody's head with how bad the wrong photo being presented can warp people's perspective of the situation. I don't understand how someone has to even ask that question, but yeah, it's probably politically driven, because it almost, whatever side of the political aisle you're on with these, it tends to shape how you feel about these stories in a lot of people's minds. And that I don't get, man. Just listen to the facts. It's kind of like the whole Kyle Rittenhouse story too. Mm-hmm. That they have people to this day that believe he shot black people.
And there was no pictures in that one, was the thing. They didn't want you to realize that he shot 3 white guys.
Yeah, it was, and that was purposely done too. And I mean, he's another one that whole story took a totally different path than what it should have, and it was all done by the omissions of media.
And by the way, to be clear, there were some. It's not like I think that the cops were in the right in all these cases, or law enforcement. There were some cases, I think, in the Eric Garner case, which was out of Staten Island, which I do a chapter on. Mm-hmm. I think pretty clearly with Derek Chauvin. Some people have tried to rewrite that, but I mean, I think we saw what it was, and I spoke to a lot of homicide detectives about it. But it's the coverage, it's the context, right? Yes. When and here's a great example. I don't know if you guys ever saw this, but there was a poll that was done, and I think it was done in 2020. And they asked people, first, how do you identify politically? And then second, what do you think? How many unarmed black men do you believe that police killed in 2019? So people who identified as liberal or very liberal picked the bracket that was 1,000 to 9,999. The people who identified as very conservative said 100. And what do you think the real number was?
It's not even that.
It was 14. So even very conservative had overestimated it by a factor of 7. That's the job. That's a crime of omission. It's the job of the media to say, look, this is a horrifying incident. And I don't blame people for being pissed watching, Chauvin and how and what he did. But that's a horrifying incident. But let's remember how rare these incidents have gotten. This is a outlier case.
So is that, as far as the George Floyd case, was there anything that you feel was left out of that contributed to all the chaos, or do you think that they pretty much nailed that one with saying Chauvin, did what they accused him of doing?
I think he did what they accused him of doing, and I think he was guilty of a homicide. But I also think after 8 years of cherry picking the cases that fit a predetermined narrative and making those, exploding those, so everybody knew those people's names, and getting people to such a boiling point, and then you happen to have lockdowns at the same time, and then you see this footage. Um, I understand. Most people aren't going to go back and check source material or go do their own research. So if you're just a regular CNN watcher, or ABC News did a ton of coverage on this, and it was pretty one-sided. And there's rarely, if ever, context about how rare these incidents are, how it's not necessarily racial, because when you do have these incidents of police violence, they do cut across all racial groups. Because there was none of that, I think you had an enraged population, and 8 years later, and by the summer of 2020, when this happened, people just left their houses, and it was millions of people. Were marching. So what I do flaw in that coverage about Floyd is the way that the rioting was covered, right? So two things can be true at the same time. I went back and was watching the way that the networks handled the Rodney King rioting in 1992, and there wasn't an attempt to lie or misrepresent it or minimize the violence. All things could be true at the same time. There was shock and outrage about the verdict. A lot of people felt it was unjust, and some people were taking advantage of it to commit crime. And I think that in 2020, there was a pretty clear, during the day, you had literally millions of Americans who were out there during the day. And I think, those protests were peaceful, and those people were pissed and wanted change. And whether we agree or disagree, that's not the part of the journalists to lean into that. It was just to present what was, which was that there was this outpouring of emotion. But at night, when cities were burning and when people were getting killed and when there was violence and looting, the decision, and I get into this, and some of those were at the highest level, the decision that was made to minimize that the rioting and conflate it with the real peaceful protests, that's where I think you ran into a lot of credibility killers. So you had those, the famous shot of a guy in a live shot. There's a building behind him, fully engulfed in flames, and he said, and the banner said,
Mostly.
"Mostly peaceful protests intensify." Right.
Yeah.
So that's not. That's Orwellian, when you're seeing one thing and you're being told not to believe it.
So how do they do that? I mean, do you think someone like him, the one you're talking about, that reporter that said that with that fire, do you think he gets told anything when he gets back to the station? Like, man, why did you say that? I mean, do you think
that was actually a banner. So that in that particular case, that's somebody in the control room who's putting that. The reporter wouldn't even have known about it.
I thought he didn't say those words. That wasn't him that turned around and kind of looked at it.
There were cases that were similar to that. I'm thinking of, there was one particular case where it was a lower third banner that said that. But you had, but I talk about it in the book. There are a lot of cases where literally you would see 50 to 100 people throwing projectiles at the cops and looting and breaking windows, and the voiceover would say, the protests are mostly peaceful. So it's like, you were fighting the reality of the footage. And as we talked about, video is the driving force. Footage is the driving force in television. It is how people process the information. And one of the first things you learn when you go into a newsroom is you don't write a story and then find video to cover it. This may sound like a small difference. You find your best video and then you write to it. And that's actually a completely different way of doing putting together a piece. And what they were basically doing is using their best video and then telling you not to, don't really believe what you saw. I know it looks like the town's burning, but it's really not.
It's really not just a facade, yeah.
And they get a green light to do stuff like that. I mean, there's nobody higher up that checks this and says, "Look, we can't be that bad." I mean, come on, guys, we can't be that blatant with it. They just don't care.
I don't know. They care. They're scared. I mean, in that summer of 2020,
Gotcha.
you had so much fear. I spoke to a Minneapolis anchor woman who got pulled off the air just as the rioting started. And it turned out because her husband was a high up in the police department. And that was the only reason. And she had to sit out the entire thing. And then she had protesters who were coming out. And she was telling me there were internal memos saying, do not use the term riot. You can say uprising. So everything was starting to get very politicized. And so, again, journalism is losing its way. Instead of just calling the balls and strikes, they're not, it's not the job of the journalists to cast judgment on the protests or even the violence, even though, violence should be something we all obviously are against.
Sure.
But it's to present it and to tell it truthfully and honestly. And here's what's happening. During the day, you got one crowd, and then at night when it gets dark, for the most part, you have a different group of people that are trying to use this as an excuse to commit violence and steal things.
Well, I mean, you're a guy who's been on both sides, news producer and now author calling out the industry. So, I mean, did writing this book change how you look at your own past work or any of your colleagues? Or, I mean, how do you feel about that? I mean, have you done anything that you might now look back and say that was a little questionable?
Probably. I give one story of when I was, and this is a small story. It wasn't an super important one, but I was in entertainment news, and there was a Winona Ryder. We had acquired surveillance footage of her shoplifting. I think it was at Saks Fifth Avenue in Beverly Hills.
I remember that.
And
I remember that.
and I put together a piece, and I was told it looks a little too much like she's guilty. Can you just kind of soft pedal the video, because we might get we might get an interview with her.
Right.
So yeah, not proud of that. I do mention that in the book. I mean, look, to be clear, this is in its weirdest way a love letter to journalism, because I do love the business. I do love TV news. I do think it plays an important role. I just think it's lost its way, and I really want to see it get better. Not only, it sounds highfalutin, not only for the country, but I do think that we hear so much about polarization. I think that responsibility to a large degree is with a healthy press, because all a healthy press does, it doesn't mean you and someone else are going to necessarily agree on something, but if you have a shared reality, it's going to moderate everybody's opinion, right? If you are absolutely convinced that we have what was it, the AOC clock on global warming? Do we have a year left, 2 years left, and then it's it's the point of no return and we're doomed? You're going to live in one certain reality, and you're going to, if you really believe that, and if you believe it's a hoax, you're going to live in another reality, and neither are true, and the truth is somewhere in the middle. And I think if people can sort of embrace that reality, and journalism can do that, then the disagreements won't be quite so polarized.
Well, I like the term shared reality, because that's where we all
Yes.
should be. And we're just not, because you said it. One person can look at a situation and have an opinion on it, and somebody else will look at the same situation and have polar opposite way of seeing it. And it's just so odd to me sometimes. And I'm sure I'm guilty of it. There's things I believe in that some people think I'm crazy for believing in. And it's just amazing.
Give me one. Give me one.
Well, I mean, if especially on this show, if you defend anything Trump is doing, it's the total polar opposite. When in my comment sections, if there's liberals running amok that night, I mean, you could just get as simple as Trump is a blatant racist, and I'm like, well, how? Prove it. Tell me how. But they believe in their mind that he is, and I don't, because I've heard people that have worked close to Trump, that knew Trump before he was even thinking about running for president, that of all races and genders and everything, that worked with this man who had no complaints at all. So you figure news like that would have been come out. It's not like Trump just became famous, So that I'll always argue that point with him, that there's absolutely zero proof that he's a blatant racist. I mean, it never ends, but it all seems to be politically driven, the things that people argue about. And maybe it's just where you get your news from. I don't know, because of these omissions, that it shapes our opinions on things. I try to step back every now and then and look at it through the lens of the other side, but sometimes it's hard because some of their opinions seem batshit crazy to me. Like when it comes to, without getting too far down these holes, but when it comes to just the whole sexualization of children and these gender changes with kids, they have people that will argue me up and down that there's nothing wrong with allowing a child to change their sex. And I know that's not what you came on here for, but you asked, what to give you an example, and that's one there. Like, how does anybody in their right mind believe a child should be able to make that decision? But they think I'm crazy.
Right. So those are opinion points, and that's interesting. But how about there are things that people cannot agree on that have nothing to do with opinions, that are objective facts, that there's data that can, conclusively decide the argument one way or the other, right? If people want to talk about, okay, climate change is a good one.
Yes.
I don't know how this. So I don't know how this will land with this group, but look, the election in 2020. That's a if you guys are football fans, that was a 28-14 final score, and the losing team's complaining about a few bad calls. Yeah, you lost by enough. Didn't matter. And so, I think that people have so gotten into their corners that people believe in a lot of counterfactuals. And it's the job of journalists not to try to convince people of anything, but I think to look, if people trusted the media, if all these things we talked about hadn't happened over the previous 10 years, from the coverage of the anti-police movement to the Me Too, to Brett Kavanaugh, to COVID, maybe when those election results came in 2020, there wouldn't have been as many people who are like, nah, I don't believe it.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. I think a good one that we kind of had that people were just like, nope, don't believe it, is during the Renee Good thing, where there's a video that she, hits the ICE agent with her car. She touched him. It's on video, right? Now, we immediately get comments like, no, she never touched him with her car. And it's right there. It's on video. We're playing it live in front of you. It's on video. The car touches the man.
Well, yeah.
Now,
because it becomes,
whether she meant to hit him, that would be your opinion. But the car touched him, and no, it never happened. Okay.
Right. So the car touched him. I did go through that with a couple of law enforcement people, just out of my own interest, and they all said, I mean, I don't know whether it would be charges or not, but that was a very, very poorly trained officer. Like, for one thing, you never stand in front of a car like that when you're trying to arrest a suspect. He's kind of putting himself in a position to get dinged. So, but that's just, these are subjective opinions, right? So we have to know.
But the car touching him isn't an opinion, is what Justin was saying. People will argue that with us, and we're watching the same video on our live stream, and they're in the comments saying that she never touched him. And it's like, you're arguing because you don't think the shooting was justified. That's a different argument. But to sit there and watch the same video and see two different things is amazing to me.
I'll give you another one. I'll give you the classic one that I find just amazing, is the Elon Musk alleged Nazi salute.
Yes.
If you watch that full footage,
sure,
how can anybody look? And I'm a Jew. I come from a family of survivors. So, I'd be the first one. I have a Tesla. I would sell it in a second if I really thought that's what he was doing. But, we have seen that gesture done by a whole bunch of politicians, from Cory Booker and that was a delusion. I mean, and I've talked to otherwise really sensible, smart people, and they will insist that that is what they saw to this day, because I think at this point, people want to see it. People want to see what they want to see.
Sure. Well, you do. And it's all, and like, most of it's politically driven. It's whatever side of the political spectrum you fall on, that's the story you're going with, instead of just trying to look at something down the middle. People have a hard time doing that right now, and the media is not helping at all. Because half the time, if you're only watching CNN, well, that's all you're getting. If you're only watching Fox News, that's all you're getting. And both sides are going to spin a narrative to fit whatever they're trying to push. Neither side's innocent in this, So sometimes you got to break away from that stuff, man, and just really analyze something and stop thinking of it in such a political form. And I just think we can come to some agreements more that way in this country, But like I said, the media is no help at all right now.
Well, I'm going to try to give an analogy. Let's say you're watching, go back to football. You're watching a football game. Sorry to announce this, I'm a Patriots fan. I grew up in Boston, right? But, if I'm watching a game with somebody who's I was going to say the Jets, but that's just too sad. Somebody who's a Buffalo Bills fan, right? And there's a call, and they call holding on one of my, players in the secondary. I'm probably likely to, that wasn't a hold. And he's like, oh my God, he mugged him. And I think that's human nature. But the thing is, we now have refs. The journalist is supposed to be the ref who's calling it impartially. And now the refs want to be part of the game. And that's the problem, right? The refs,
good point.
The refs have action on the game, and therefore we don't trust their calls anymore. And so that's a tortured analogy, but basically.
No, but that's that's a real good analogy, because that's exactly what's going on right now. And speaking of the press and the media just in general, now once this book drops, I mean, what kind of reaction do you expect? I mean, you have friends that are still in this, I'd assume.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, I talked to a lot of people, from a lot of legendary reporters I talked to Shepard Smith, who was over at Fox. He gave me a lot of time. He was great. And Ashley Banfield and Diane Diamond and Pat LaLama. I mean, just a lot of these legendary reporters. And I will say that they were open to the premise of this, and they were, not everybody agreed with it, but I think everybody saw that there's a problem. I think that the backlash that I'll get are people who are not journalists, and who are on that side, right? And because I didn't intend to write a conservative book, I'm just trying to call balls and strikes. But there are a lot of people who are very invested in the anti-police movement and the BLM-led movement, and I bet without reading it, some people will just dismiss it.
I was going to say, no matter what your intention was, you're going to get painted as some right-wing activist, because they're going to make it like you're going after the media. And if you do that nowadays, you have to be super right-leaning, because, everybody who disagrees with the media, of course, is just some crazy MAGA nut. And I didn't know if that you had any concern about backlash like that, or it's just basically
I mean, look, I'm not excited about it, and I'm sure it'll happen. But I think that the difference is, I just openly, I love TV, and I love the media, and I love journalism when it's done correctly. And so I'm not coming at it I do not think that journalists are the enemy of the people. And I think that actually it's a really important part of the democracy, but it's got to be done right. And I think that it's lost its way. So, people can say what they want, but I'm not of the point of view that this only happens on one side. Look, it's a really challenging president to cover, and I've talked to some people in the book who have covered him. He is challenging because, his style not only is confrontational when it's on camera, but he's also trying to work the refs. It's Bobby Knight yelling at the refs the whole time and chewing them out, and no matter what the call is, because he's trying to get the next call. And it's not the media's job to cave to that, but it's also not the media's job then to say, we're going to get this guy.
Sure.
And I think that footing has been very, very difficult for people who cover him. I mean, it's been 10 years and they still don't have it.
Still don't.
No, they don't.
How did you decide?
And I see no problem with it. No, I see no problem with that. I think it keeps them open and honest. But so I guess what we're saying is we just need to make journalism great again, right?
There you go. Maja.
I mean, so why not? Maja. Perfect.
Well, how did you decide what cases to focus on in this book?
I try to take the biggest flashpoint ones, the ones that got the most attention over the time. And not all of them were, I did the one Micah Johnson, who was the former military officer who was so enraged by the coverage that he went and shot and killed, I think it was 4, maybe 5 police officers in Dallas. Do you remember that story?
Oh yeah,
that was a big story. Yeah. So he had a really interesting background. I think that chapter is really fascinating. I also did a story about somebody you may not know. Have you ever heard of Tony Timpa?
Doesn't ring a bell, no sir.
Okay. And the fact that it doesn't ring a bell is part of the problem. So this was a guy in just a few days after what happened in Dallas. He's a white guy who came from a well-off family. He had a $250,000 a year job for his dad. Was kind of unclear what he was doing really, but anyway, he had problems. He had demons. He had drug problems, and one day he was on a terrible bender, and he did one responsible thing all day, which was he called 911 on himself. He's like, I need someone to come get me. So after he hangs up the phone with 911, he's just having a psychic break. He starts running down a busy street. He's running on buses. Everyone's calling 911. There's this crazy guy, he's just running around. He's lost it. A couple of security guards grab him. They bring him to the side of the road, like by the lawn, and he is out of it. He's just screaming and yelling. 4 cops show up. They have body cams. You can actually look this up on YouTube. The body cam footage is there. And for 14 minutes, I remember with George Floyd, it was 9. For 14 minutes, they kept a knee to his neck. And not only that, and you can hear it again on the tape, they're making jokes the whole time. Not very funny ones, but like juvenile jokes about this guy who's like, because he stopped struggling and he stopped talking. He had been screaming and, I can't breathe. I'm going to die. Just kill me. He was crying. And then he just stopped. And they kept the knee to the neck and he died. And you don't know his name because
No.
I spoke to his the family attorney, and he said, I tried CNN, I tried everybody. Nobody wanted this. Nobody wanted this story.
It doesn't sell. It doesn't sell, and it doesn't push the narratives that they're after, apparently.
So that's where you get into a huge crime of omission, because that is a newsworthy case. And if cases like that had also been covered, in addition to the others, if there had been context that these cases were rare but horrible, there might have been a lot of calls for police reforms. There might have been a lot of positive changes that came out of it. But I think that people in America would not be under the impression from the coverage that people of color were being hunted on the streets of America by the thousands. And that's what they believed, because that's what the coverage led them to believe.
God. Well, for just everybody listening that might want to grab this book coming out in June, I mean, what's the biggest takeaway you hope they walk away with after reading it?
I mean, I really do think that that's a good question. I mean, look, I think it's an interesting and hopefully a fast-paced and entertaining read that will really give you insights into this whole story that you didn't have before. But I think that the biggest takeaway, if I really had to get down to it, I think this is about truth. I do believe that truth is the only answer. It moderates. Sometimes it can be hard. Sometimes it's things we don't want to hear. But it's not just journalism. You have other professions that in the last 10, 15 years have been corrupted because something else has been held up other than a search for truth. So you have, I'll just really quick, I have a chapter with Roland Fryer, who's a data scientist. He's a Black data scientist who was watching the Michael Brown case, and he decided, I want to put together a study to make BLM's case for them, because I'm sure that Blacks are being disproportionately killed by police officers. So he was at Harvard. He was a rock star data scientist, like young guy. He had tenure. He actually went on the late night shows. Like he was his career was on the huge upswing. So he puts together this study, and he remembers the moment when one of his students came back to him and said, I don't think you're going to like what we got. And when he looked at it, he saw that basically there was a difference, and he didn't shy away from saying this, when it was things like chokeholds or just like maybe throwing cuffs on. There was a difference where maybe police were maybe about 20% more aggressive with a Black suspect than a white suspect. But he also found that when it came time to shooting, to actually pulling the gun, they were slightly less likely to shoot percentage-wise a Black suspect than a white suspect, which really blew up the BLM narrative. So he released it. He didn't think anything of it. The New York Times ran the story a few days later, and as soon as they ran it, he was basically canceled.
He was gone.
And he was
And
done
didn't
because
they tell him not to run that? Like his colleagues told him, like,
Yes.
don't do this. And he actually, I believe, he pulled in a second group to rerun all the numbers, right? And go through all the data again.
Yeah, and he, I give him so much credit. He had an absolute unwavering commitment to the truth. And even though when the truth came back, in a way that he didn't want or expect, he wasn't going to bury it. He thought it was important, like
Sure.
it needed to be part of the conversation. And the resistance he met, and all his so-called friends who turned on him, I think that says a lot. So when you ask me what I want to get out of the book, I think that people need to, first you have to trust the source, right? So that's, journalism lost that and it needs to regain it. It'll take time. But it also does have to have the courage to call out truths. Sometimes the things people didn't want to
Yeah.
hear, but if it is truth backed by data, backed by evidence, it's got to be released. It's got to be, you know, anytime that we come up with a secondary reason, feelings are more important, or, we don't want to, there's been a lot of gender studies. We were talking about gender earlier. There were a lot of gender studies that sort of studied innate traits of boys versus girls, and those proved to be politically incorrect. And the people who put those studies together got themselves in hot water. So,
Right.
when we're having these kind of witch trials where, when people really try to come out with truth wherever that leads, and they suffer for it, well, that kind of explains why you saw this sort of fearful mentality in 2020, where no news director wanted to be accused of taking part in all lives matter relativism. So when Tony Timpa is brought to them, yeah, they don't want it. When some reporters might say, look, we got to talk about some of the looting and the violence and the deaths that are going on, and these cities are burning out of control, let's soft pedal it. It's like Charlie Munger used to say, show me the incentives, I'll show you the outcome.
Well, it's just
Good
it's
point.
scary how
Good
these
point.
omissions, they didn't just mislead viewers. They actually shaped protest, as you mentioned, policy changes, even elections. I mean, the media has to bear real responsibility for some of that chaos that was caused by their reporting or lack thereof. I mean, I don't know how you hold them responsible, but it just seems like they should have to bear some of the responsibility for these terrible outcomes that come from some of these stories that they push, man. It's a shame that they get away with it, but I mean, what do? Besides try to expose it and let people know what the truth is. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know what else you can do to these guys. They're powerful, man. They're big.
Well, people vote with their
Absolutely.
feet, right? So
True.
if News Nation is a smaller upstart cable news service and they're trying to do objective news, maybe people should give them a try and support them. I mean, there are places that are starting to try. We'll see what kind of changes Barry Weiss can make at CBS.
Yeah.
But I think
Mhm.
I think ultimately it's up to us. If we keep wanting to watch news that provokes and inflames, then that's where
Yeah.
the incentive structures are going to be, and that's what we're going to get more of.
Yeah,
So,
and honestly, I don't watch it. I scroll a lot. Like I get on X and I try to see what the latest news stories are. Then I'm like, okay, well, let me check in on this because I don't like just reading the headline because it's always misleading. So, like, I don't sit down and watch the news. I just can't do it anymore. I mean, I used to watch, of course, I'd have Fox News on in the evenings, and I just can't take it anymore. So I just try to find my own news stories that catch my attention, and then I try to do a little research on them and try to draw some sort of opinion that's not politically biased. And I mean, like I said, if you're stuck watching mainstream media, then apparently you lean one way, and that's probably the way you're going to look at a news story is through the lens of whatever political party you're voting for. So I'm with you. You got to get away from that, at least the big guys, and try to find some other sources, man, that seem credible. But it's the only way to really change it.
and you got to make sure that they're good sources, because look, I spend more time than I care to on X. I mean, a lot of that is BS, so
Yeah.
there are a lot of
It's true.
sources there that are so bad and so spreading so much misinformation that you're better off watching, as flawed
Yeah.
as MS Now might be. It's closer to reality than some of these. Then I wouldn't watch Candace Owens.
Right. No, I'm with you. But see, here's the difference. So you and I can approach going on X thinking like that. That, okay,
Exactly.
I got to take all of this with a grain of salt. Let me do some research on these stories and this, that, and other. A lot of people don't, man. They'll see somebody post something and all of a sudden it's etched in stone in their mind. It's truth. It's reality. And anything on the internet is so far from that, and that's how I try to approach my daily scrolling, because I'm a scroller too on X, way more than I care to admit. And you know how I know you're on there pretty often? Because it didn't take you long to respond to my post when I tagged you in it this morning. And I was like, oh, he's pretty active on here.
I'm pretty active on X, but I'm always fact checking, like unless it's a source that I really, really know to be true. I'll see stuff on the Iran war. Breaking news, whatever. There's a site, there's sites like Red Alert. I mean, they have 3/4 of the time they've just mixed stuff up, so it's like I'll go do an old school Google search sometimes when I see a headline, and if I can't find it anywhere, then, it's probably not true. If there really was a 30-day ceasefire or a 60-day ceasefire, someone's going to pick it up.
So true. So true.
But that's, look, it's doctors lost a lot of credibility, speaking of truth, during COVID. That doesn't, right? But that doesn't mean that, somebody that's got an account on YouTube and is telling me that, grapes are going to cure my lung cancer is, a better alternative. I'll stick with the doctor.
Right. So,
so I think Jeremy Boring, who was the guy with Ben Shapiro, did a podcast like a week or two ago, and I thought he made a great point, which is it's very powerful when you can prove to people that someone has been lying to you, but then you need to give them an alternative, and a lot of times the alternative is worse. And I do think that that's just another problem with what's happened with journalism losing the trust of the public, is that you can't convince people now that, Candace Owen and her conspiracy theories, or, whoever, what's his name? Hassan Piker. He's the left-wing guy, who just went to Cuba in a $1,500 shirt. You can't convince people that they're not the purveyors of truth. No, they're the ones who are telling it to you straight. So, that's yet another incentive why I'm sorry, I'm diverting a little bit, but that's kind of the problem, I think, at the core of, I think, a lot of these news organizations. There's an arrogance that somehow this is the fault of the viewers, that they're losing viewership and they're losing trust. Their leader has told them to believe these alternative things. And the problem is they don't realize that when you are standing in front of a fire and you're saying that it's peaceful, or when in California, Target was open the entire time through the COVID lockdowns, but so many people lost their businesses and nobody asked why, that people stop trusting you. So they go to other places to try to get their information. And you have to heal yourself first. You have to make yourself trustworthy, make people understand that there's been a shift, and you've recognized that you had lost your way. And now that the way to come back is, we're here. We have no dog in this fight. We're here to report truth. And when people, it's a slow process, but when it can get there, I think it'll heal a lot of things.
Well, and another big one, like, they tried to go after someone like Joe Rogan, who's got one of the biggest platforms in the world. And when CNN pulled that stunt and filtered that man's face that time when he was sick with COVID, and somebody did that and apparently didn't think that, well, maybe we're going to get caught, or maybe this is a bad idea. I don't know if they're that arrogant, or they just don't think that anybody's ever going to do any type of fact checking on that. And when like I said, when you go after somebody with a platform as huge as Rogan's, you got to be on your A game, because everybody knows now that that it was nonsense the way that they did that. And it just shows what the media can and will do to push a certain narrative. And that one right there was so blatant, and they got caught. They got caught red-handed and never once apologized, never even addressed it. They just go on. And it just blows my mind, because there was somebody behind the scenes that purposely did that. And I don't know if this stuff goes up a chain of commands before it hits the air. I don't know how it works behind the scenes, but somebody knew it was wrong. 100% false.
I mean, the one thing with TV news that I will say for them is you're constantly crashing and you're against the clock. And so you'd be surprised how few checks and balances there can be on a newscast, because it's,
everything's just like
everything's live and happening. So there's certain types of stories, certainly something that's like an investigative piece. The lawyers will go through it, and management will go through it, and they'll give you notes, and they have to, recut certain things. But, if you're out in the field somewhere and you're doing a story, from West Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, on the synagogue bomber, that's a quick turnaround. You're editing that in the truck, and you send it back to them, and probably probably nobody sees it before it goes on air.
right.
So
Wow.
there's a lot of the intent of the reporter, the intent of the producer needs to be good and fair, because you're really counting on them to a great degree to and in the book I get into it. There are so many ways that people don't even realize that you can commit these crimes of omission, that you can taint a story, that you can commit little distortions to make people feel a certain way.
Nick Sandman, you remember that case? I don't know if
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
Yep.
didn't he win lawsuits against a lot of those big
We're talking about
media?
Covington, right? That was
Is that
Covington.
what? Yeah,
Was
yeah. I'm
that
sorry.
was that the Covington case with the Native Americans?
Yes, yes. When he walked
Yeah.
up
Yes.
to them, and they, of course, the media painted like he was just out there starting trouble with them, and
Yes.
just being this blatant bigot and racist. And it was a total opposite, from once you
100%
actually
right.
got to the facts. So that was another one that they spun in a certain way, and they were only showing you portions of a video, and that was it. So if that's the only thing you ever paid attention to, you just went on believing that what they were saying was what this young kid was out there doing, and it just wasn't the truth.
Or, I think the Jussie Smollett story probably needed a little more vetting. I remember the day
Oh,
after
without a
the day
doubt.
after that
Yeah.
broke, I called, I won't even say who, but I called a detective I work with a lot, and I'm like, is it me, or does this seem really weird? He's like, it seems weird. It is, it's 10 degrees below zero. It's 1:30 in the morning. You're a star, and you're not even calling Instacart. You're like walking to a Subway in the middle of the freezing cold, and there just happens to be like two Klansmen, like something out of like Mississippi in
Yeah, MAGA
1936,
hats.
with rope and everything, just waiting in the ice cold. And then you come back and you have no visible injuries. Well, anyway, it did seem a little suspect, but
Yeah.
it
They
was
rolled with it.
completely credulous. And if you remember, I think, I don't want to misquote, but I think some of the biggest names, both in show business and in politics, were posting on X saying this is, horrific, and our hearts go out, and then, as always happens, when it turns out that it unravels, it's never the apologies quiet, right? The headlines are very loud.
And
Yeah.
it would almost give a lot of those people so much credibility if they would just do it every now and then and say, "Look, we got that one wrong. We jumped the gun. We got it wrong. I want to apologize to anybody that we offended or whatever. Just some sort of just every now and then suck it up and say we were wrong." That's one of the biggest things you can ever do for any type of
Yes.
credibility, is just to say, "Hey, I got that one wrong. I'll try to do
Some
better."
form of apology.
Just
Yeah.
something, just admit
Yeah.
you were wrong. And you never
Right.
hear that from those people, like you said, especially with that old Jussie Smollett stuff. Like, nobody ever came out and said, yeah, that we really got that one wrong, include himself. He's still sticking to this story. It's crazy to this day. Then there's journalists, if you want to call them that are going to have his back until the end of time. Man, it's just crazy. I just think that's a big part of it too. If the media could just ever come out and say we were wrong on that one, people might start having a little bit more faith. But you'll never hear that from them. So,
Well, that's what happened in these anti-police cases. Almost each time, the cases would fall apart, right? In the case of George Zimmerman, you had a jury of his peers who found him not guilty. I think it was a 6-woman jury pool. They found him not guilty, and instead of saying, "Well, maybe we got this wrong, maybe there was something that jurors saw that we didn't," it was sort of a circular logic where it was like, "Well, that just proves that the system's broken." Right. In the Freddie Gray case, which I outlined, which was really outrageous, the way they went after some of those cops. Freddie Gray was the one out of Baltimore, where he was allegedly died from a rough ride. He was arrested and
Yeah.
put in a paddy wagon. And they put 6 officers on, charged them. Some would be life in prison if they were had been convicted of everything, some 20 years. One of them was this woman, a black woman who was on the job, and she literally just like opened the door and checked in on him for like 10 seconds, and he mumbled and she just closed the door. And she's charged. And one by one, the cases were falling apart, and they were taking the officers to trial, and they were being acquitted. And ultimately, the district attorney decided to just drop the charges on the remaining officers. But there was no sense that, okay, we went through this whole process. All these juries are finding these, and they're diverse juries, are finding these officers not guilty. Maybe we're getting the story wrong somehow. And by the way, this is another one where Eric Holder's Department of Justice puts out a report and basically backs up the version of events from the police officers and declines to file civil rights charges against them. And again, they're just kind of doubling down. It's this kind of circular logic. Well, the lack of justice is just proof that the system's broken. So there was just kind of just couldn't win.
Sure. And it's crazy, though, because if we sat here all night, you could keep coming up with different cases and different stories. It's
over
never
and
ending.
over.
I mean, because you're naming ones that I had forgot about, and it's like, oh yeah, that
Absolutely.
one too, and oh yeah, that one too. I mean, it's just it never ends, and I don't see an end in sight with it when it comes to these big media companies, for one. So I mean, just you got to start getting your source, your news source from somewhere else. Apparently,
I've got hope. I got hope.
Well, I'm glad you do. I'm glad you do. And with that, Rob, look, it's been fantastic, brother. Thank you so much for coming on and going so deep, really, with us on this Crimes of Omission, man. It really eye-opening stuff. I hope everyone's on the lookout. I think it's June 2nd. The book comes out.
Pre-sales now, wherever you get your books. So Crimes
I
of
was going to
Omission
ask you
by
if there
Rob
was a
Rosen.
certain... Okay. Crimes of Omission, Distorted Justice, The Media's War on Truth. I love it. It drops June 2nd. If you want the real story behind those huge cases and how the media shaped what we thought we knew, go pre-order it now. Rob, it's been a pleasure, and hopefully we can do this again, man. Maybe when the book drops.
I would love to.
Well, I appreciate it. We'll stay in touch, brother.
All right. Thank you.
Be good.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate you.
Oh, Rob was fun, man. Yeah, it sounds like an amazing book because, I mean, it's right along what we talk about a lot with just this media and the bias, and, you know, it's evident. I mean, you can't say it doesn't exist. No matter what side of the political aisle you're on, you cannot say that it doesn't exist. And it's a shame because
it does.
Right. It's like, where do you get your news from nowadays? I mean, it's impossible. Right. It's impossible to get anything you can trust in most of the time, it just leaves us arguing with each other, you know, as far as that's not the truth. Oh, no, that's a lie. That's this. And it's all just on what station you're watching. When if we just all realize they're all full of shit, maybe we can all get along.
Every one of them, Shane. Every one of them are full of shit, you know?
Yeah, Matt's talking about Newsmax, and I don't know if they're any better because they're just a conservative right-leaning news station. So if you think they're not going to be biased at all, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's I don't know.
I get my factual news from BSing with the guys.
That's where I get it from, just us.
Exactly.
You know, so people in the chats, man. But real quick, you know, before we get off, I don't know if y'all saw, but, you know, Trump basically gave Iran some sort of ceasefire deal. And it's crazy with the conflicting stories that you're hearing, because when you listen to Trump, everything's fine. They've been talking. He's got these deals coming on. And then Iran basically comes out and is like, fuck you and your deal. We're not taking it. So I don't know how this shit ends, man. It's almost like you've got a stalemate. You know, I mean, Iran flat out rejected Trump's 15-point ceasefire plan and countered it with their own demands. You know,
Israel is bombing the shit out of all of it. Yes. So you don't know who to believe. You really don't, dude. You really don't know who to believe.
No, I don't know. I mean, I know. I think Iran wants I don't know. I guess them to stop bombing. For one, they want them to admit that they're in the wrong, basically, for doing this. They want to stop all the attacks and assassinations. They want us to pay reparations. They want a guarantee of no future wars. And they want a regional ceasefire for allies like Hezbollah and full Iranian control of the Strait. Now, I don't see Trump giving in to any of that shit. I just think he's way too far into this, and Trump's not the type that's going to sit there and give these people any fucking wiggle room. So if that's the case and they stand by this, are we starting to see a long-term conflict / war, whatever you want to call it? Are we starting to watch that play out? It's crazy, man.
Yes.
And I mean,
you're talking 8,000 Marines, another 3,200 or 3,000 82nd Airborne are going to be flown in. I don't know. And look, as much as I've said it on here before, Shane, and I'm against it, I was against the whole going in and doing what they had to do. I didn't like it from the get-go. Leave it be. Let them do what they got to do. Focus on this country and the problems we have here. But it's like, fuck, now you're in it. What do you do, you know? So I do believe you have to take that regime out. You have to get rid of it. It has to be done. Who you put in? I don't know. I'm not in that diplomatic position to decide that. That would be more Marco Rubio and Donald Trump. With that being said, I don't see this. And I know they're talking this May 14th deadline, and I don't see it. I just don't see it, you know?
Well, and I have a hard time disagreeing with the comment that's on the screen right now. Trump is Israel's little bitch. And look, I voted for the man. But it just seems like what Israel wants, they get out of this administration, man. And
say no more, dude.
Yeah, I don't know the reasoning behind it, but it just seems to be that way. But with the Hormuz chokehold there is spiking energy prices worldwide. I mean, casualties seem to be mounting on all sides. The U.S. troops are heading in. I mean, it isn't just a regional fight, man. It's affecting gas prices, supply chains, and the market right now. And I mean, everything that Trump said wasn't going to happen seems to be kind of happening right now with this. And I don't know where it ends, because you've got one side, like I said, Trump's statements coming out every day. You hear Trump, he's talking about how they had great conversations with these people. And then Iran's state media comes out and says, we don't know what the fuck he's talking about. Basically, we're not giving in anything. Yeah. So, man, I don't even know which side to believe anymore. It's crazy, but it doesn't look like it's ending anytime soon, unless Trump just decides to go in there and just fuck everything up and get out. Yeah. So I don't know, man. I don't know. It's crazy, and I'm. That's why we're in Iran. I wonder that myself. Is that the only reason that we're even over there is because of Israel's wishes, man? So CSR is having a field day with this shit, that we're actually kind of catching on that Trump may be kind of he's loving it.
Oh, he's eating it up tonight, dude.
I think Trump's in a bad position right now because he can't give in. For one, that's not in his nature. And for two, it just shows weakness, which no leader wants to show. So you've got that going on with the Iranian leadership too. They don't want to give in. You know what I mean? Because then they look weak. So then what do we do? Do you think
there's any way Trump wins here with where we're at? I mean, any decision that happens from this point?
It depends on how many casualties they have on the American side. Because if it starts to mount, it's going to look very bad on him. And if this shit lingers for months or, a year, whatever, that's horrible too, because he ran on no forever wars. And I know a year is not a forever war, but the way he presented it is, if we ever get into any kind of issues, we're going to get in there, we're going to get the fuck out.
Do what we got to do and get out, right?
This isn't turning into get in and get out right now.
Right.
I mean, because not with the way Iran is talking, at least. Now, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. Maybe they're just trying to bluff and look powerful in front of their people, but behind the scenes, maybe they are having conversations with our administration. I don't know. If you listen to Trump, they are, and they're almost at a deal. Yeah. And then
and here
Iran's
you go again with it.
Deal.
And here you go again with it, Shane. Just like Rob was saying, you can't trust the media, because if you listen on the Trump side is, Trump pro-Israel side, that we've hit 9,000 or 10,000 targets, and mean, Iran is still launching shit. So as much decimation and what we're doing over there, they're still around. I mean, that regime is still around somewhere. Yeah, I don't know. I think it goes longer than what he was talking, this 5 or 6 weeks. And God, I pray, I do. I don't want boots on the ground. I've had people in my family serve in the Gulf War, and they do suffer with the PTSD and of that war. And I don't want to see it. I don't want to see innocent American lives wasted. And for what? That's my question is, what's it for? And if it's for nuclear, I get it. But if it's for oil, God, I'm really going to be pissed off with all of this, dude.
Yeah, and it could easily escalate into shit like you're talking about. I mean, stuff nobody wants to see. I mean, Iran keeps striking and holding the strait. Israel and the U.S. ramp up airstrikes or limited ground ops to degrade capabilities or reopen shipping lanes. I mean, Trump decides that he's going to hit harder. That could happen. So, I mean, it's just there's so much that could happen from this point, and nobody knows what the hell's going on because we're hearing conflicting stories. Right. I mean, exactly. You start getting other people involved, these other Gulf states, a full Hezbollah war and Iraq spillover. I mean, of course, now you're talking higher oil prices, global recession fears. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you got both sides dig in. I don't know, man. It's not looking good, and I don't like the fact that this is total opposite of kind of what he talked about.
It's all coming, dude. Right. It is global recession, higher oil. It's all coming, dude. It is all coming. And sometimes look, man, these people in our comments and the people that follow us, and which I have much respect for, I'll say y'all are pro-Trumpers, extreme right-wingers and all this. And we call them out as we see it. And I don't approve of this. I'm not a fan of this. I don't believe in it. But there's things, I've been researching. I think we'll bring it up on another podcast. And it's a way to divert the problems back home that will send it to the Middle East. And if it's economic, and which we have a major economic problem in this country, and what better way to divert it than, we're tied up in this Iran bullshit right now. So it's something I'm putting together. I think you and I can collaborate off air between us three, and it's going to be it'll be a good talking point. But it's just we have so many problems at home, and here we are spending probably hundreds of billions a day to fight this, and I'm like, I'm at the point like, for what? What's going to be the outcome of this? Is it based on oil? I don't know. I just don't know. Because we've seen this before. This is nothing new. We've seen this before. If it was with George Bush, or his father, we've seen this before. And I worry, And just like CSR said, history has already told us. It's a great point, sir.
Yeah, and I just don't see these 5 demands that Iran is making. I don't see in any way, shape, or form Trump giving in to this shit, which is
not at all.
I mean, they want full recognition of Iranian sovereignty and control over the Strait of Hormuz. Well, that there's so much oil that gets shipped through there. I just don't see Trump being like, okay, well, y'all can have full fucking control over it.
It's not going to happen.
I mean, and then they want these payments for war damages and full reparations and compensation. I can't see Trump doing that either, because for one, that's going to make him look no better than Obama looked. When they were giving them money, and I don't think Trump wants that look either. So if that's the 5 things they're waiting on, that's 2 of them right there that I don't see happening. I mean, one of them is just a complete halt to all aggression and assassinations. That can happen. Trump can say, okay, well, we'll stop, but y'all have to give in to these, what we're proposing. So, I mean, I guess that's a possibility if he was to say, hey, look, we'll quit, but y'all have to give in. But then Iran saying, well, no, fuck you, we want money. So, I mean, it's
1 out of 5's not bad.
No, it's crazy, dude. It's crazy. And like I said, CSR is loving it tonight.
Oh, he's loving it.
Trump's looking like shit with all of this,
Well, see, he says he warned us. Right? Well, y'all voted for this. I warned you. But he wasn't here early enough to warn us.
Yeah.
All right?
Not only that,
you should have found us earlier.
What we voted for was what Trump was pushing, which was that this shit wasn't going to happen. Not to say that we were never going to get into a conflict, but it was going to be more like the Venezuela thing. We're going to get the fuck in, we're going to do what we got to do, and we're getting the fuck out. Well, it doesn't seem like this is shaping up to be like that right now. Now, it could change. I mean, it could be tomorrow breaking news, Iran decides to make deal, but the problem is part of the deal is Trump telling them, look, you got to guarantee that you're not going to fuck with nukes no more. Well, what do you think they're going to say? It's like, that's good. Fuck yeah, we won't. And then what? When Trump's out of office, they're right back fucking to it. I mean, what that to me that does nothing. You're asking a terrorist nation to give you their fucking word. Like, the fuck out of here. So I don't know, man. I don't.
And that can be said too in the same breath, dude. That can be same in the same breath. Everybody's out here, pouring it on us that MAGA, this, that, you right wing motherfuckers or whatever. I voted for Trump. You know why I voted for Trump? Because I wanted to stop the illegals coming into this country through what Biden administration did with open borders, and I just felt it wasn't good for the country. And Trump ran on prosperity for America. He did. He ran on no endless wars, and we're going to end with conflicts around the globe and stuff. But ultimately, it was like, look, I'm looking out for ourselves in this country. I could really care less about Iran or Iraq or any Venezuela at the point. I'm looking up for us as American people that we need to prosper and we need to get our debt under control. We need to be able to create jobs, more manufacturing in this country that has been lost. And I think a lot of that to our politicians. And with that being said, it's like it's taken a whole 180 on us, man. And I don't know. I'm at a loss with it.
Yeah, a lot of it's not looking good right now. And like I said, we're early in. I mean, we're early in. Absolutely. The economy's not doing great. The gas prices are going up. And all that could change. But we talked about it the other night, approaching these midterms. I know we're a few months away, but if this shit continues on this path, it is going to be a bloodbath for the Republicans. I mean, there's no way they survive this in the midterms if Trump keeps this going like it's going. So he better find an end to this for sure, for multiple reasons. I mean, for one, we don't need to be involved in this shit overseas. Two, everybody's suffering right now because of prices. So he's got to put some sort of end to this shit right now. And
he does.
I just don't see how you do it if Iran's not willing to give in, because we're not going to give in either. It's just not going to happen.
And dude, Iran's not giving in. I mean, it's their last stronghold. I mean, it's their country. It's the regime that's been there since 1979, dude. They're not giving in until you decimate it. But I'm at the point where it's like, I guess you're here and we're there. And then what do you do? What do you do? Just pack up and say, we getting the F out of here, dude? I don't know. I don't think Trump thinks like that. Yeah. But
and look, and we got Ryan in the comments, what president is building factories? Trump is. Look at the 2-mile-long factory being built. Yeah, there's a lot of good that Trump is doing, but the problem is nobody's going to remember all that when it comes to these midterms and when it comes to casualties of American troops in a fucking war that we don't need to be in. People aren't going to remember these factories and whatever jobs Trump brought back. I mean, this is going to be an ugly stain on his legacy, so to say, as president right now. And I mean, it's one that seems like it's avoidable, I guess, depending on what reason you think they really went over there. I mean, to me, it seemed avoidable. It just seems like we're doing it for maybe not the correct reason. Now, I know it's the whole nuclear weapons thing, but I mean, are we to believe that? I mean, we've been lied to before.
Than that, dude. It's more than that, dude.
I don't know,
it really
man.
Is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. I wasn't hoping for this by any means. I mean, I know that sometimes you got to handle business. Sometimes you got to kick ass and take some names, but this isn't the way that it's going right now, at least. But anyway,
I do have a scientific video on why we haven't found Bigfoot.
So. Oh, jeez. So we're going to Bigfoot now?
Yes, we are. So
let's go to Bigfoot. Pull up the sign. I got to hear this.
Before we wrap it up, I got to see it, dude.
The reason we haven't found Bigfoot yet is because women haven't been looking for him. Think about it. They discovered the gender pay gap and the fact that guns have more rights than their bodies. See, women are experts at finding shit that's not real. The only downside is Bigfoot doesn't have a job and is prone to violence. So if women find a Bigfoot, they will get pregnant by him. Flex on your wife with sound advice.
Jesus. So that's why.
That's why we haven't found Bigfoot.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
What you doing, Brad? You getting called off?
Am I getting called off?
Somebody telling you to hurry up?
No. I don't know. Why? Somebody told me to hurry up?
No, I seen you talking to somebody earlier. I didn't know.
Oh, my wife walked in there. I was just telling her.
Tell her get on the show. Tell her get on.
Absolutely, dude.
No,
absolutely.
I did see. And the only reason I'm bringing this up is because it just reminds me of firearm type, conversations that we have. But it says the Supreme Court tosses $1 billion copyright verdict in record companies battle over illegal internet downloads. In other words, these record companies were going after these internet sites that allow you to download stuff. Now, that's not the sole purposes of these internet sites. So the Supreme Court was basically saying that they don't advertise themselves as, hey, you can download illegal shit here. So therefore, they don't bear any responsibility for people doing that on their platforms, which I think is a great ruling, because it reminds me of these people that want to sue these gun manufacturers over what people do with their guns. Because it's not like Ruger is out there selling guns saying, hey, look, you can go slaughter as many people as you want with these. And
yes.
You know what I mean? So it sets a dangerous precedent if we start holding companies like that liable for what dummies do on a service they provide when the service isn't meant for that. So I think it's a great ruling by the Supreme Court, because if it starts there with these websites that hold music, it's going to end up with gun rights, basically. Well, now we can hold, Ruger responsible for every death created by one of their firearms, So I think it's good that the Supreme Court has some common sense, apparently, and I know these record companies aren't liking it because they're losing a shit ton of money. It's easy to get online and just illegally download shit, but at the same time, if that's not the sole purpose of a website, then, what are you going to do, so it's a good verdict in my eyes, just simply because, like I said, it leads back to the whole Second Amendment discussion. So anyway, anything else important going on before we wrap it up? Justin, anything else? They found a 12,000-year-old pyramid ruins uncovered off the Louisiana coast. That could be evidence of a lost city. We'll get into that another day, because I don't want to go down that hole right now. What else? Any other headlines? Let me see it real quick. Let me see if y'all saw these assholes. This is what's happening to your fucking baggage while you're doing whatever you're doing, going on a flight. Look at these dicks with these guitars. I'm a guitar owner. I would be fucking furious if I see this video of this prick taking my $1,000+ guitars and doing. Now, what is he having a bad day or what? Because you can see he's purposely throwing the fucking things. It ain't like oops, I dropped one. Look at this dick. Whose guitars are these? They're just piling up. But that's what's happening to your shit. So remember that when you're flying. That's them TSA workers, ain't it, that aren't getting paid. That's what that's from, huh?
No, that's not them.
I might be doing the same thing, man. Fuck these guitars.
That's funny.
Anyway. Dude. All right. Well, Justin, what else, man? Anything? Brad, you getting off? Go ahead if you got to.
I'm getting ready to get off. I got to go to bed,
Justin,
dude.
Go to bed. I'm going to chop it up for a minute.
All right, fellas. Thank y'all for listening, dude. I appreciate it, dude. We'll hook up soon.
Yep. Later.
Peace.
Anyway, Justin, what's going on in this crazy ass world?
What is going on in this fucking crazy world, dude?
What's CSR getting into? What?
Oh, Jesus.
Matt, we ain't going nowhere. Matt, don't leave. What else we got? Oh, yeah. CSR brought it up. Did you see the video of your boy now with the cornhole player with no arms and legs? Because remember the other night we talked about it, and it was like he had to have some prosthetics or something to help him. But no, I guess he had like one little fucking nub.
He had like a little nub, dude.
Man, and they got this thing for. Now I saw reports that it was a girl, like she was, I guess, transitioned or whatever. One of the headlines I read. Now maybe that was bullshit.
The amputee.
The thing. Yeah, the amputee, the thing.
That's so much shit going on with it.
Damn. But I was wondering, I was like, it was blowing my mind until that video came out. Like, how does this person throw cornhole fucking sacks, and how were they pulling a fucking trigger? And then sure enough, this person had videos all over the internet, just being able to shoot, man. And I'm thinking that's pretty fucking impressive. You know?
It really is.
Yeah, Paul's saying it too. Yeah, we saw that. We saw the actual. I'd pull it up, but YouTube gets all stupid with a gun on the video because they think we're live streaming somebody shooting somebody.
They think we're walking into a mall with a gun.
Yeah. So, but no, man, that blew my mind. I was like, that's how that little fucker did it. Because at first I'm thinking, there's no way this person murdered somebody. There's no way it couldn't have. And then sure enough, no, there it was. Dude.
Sure the fuck did.
So,
it was. It blew my mind.
Yeah. It was pretty neat to watch, actually. Then I saw the video of the person throwing the cornhole things, and I'm like, okay, all right, this person's making the best out of their situation, and now
old nub
jail for fucking murder. You know, it was unarmed robbery, I guess is what they. Drewski dropping a skit, but I ain't gonna pull that up. What else we got? Let me see. I guess it's getting late enough. I guess we can shut up. I don't know. Spent more time, talking to Rob than I had planned. Not that I minded it. I don't want, if he hears that, I don't want to think I minded it. I just didn't expect it to go on that long. It was a pretty good conversation, man. Like you said,
it really was.
Just knowing how the media is, and we all kind of know it, but this guy's been around it for,
years, like behind the scenes around it,
Yeah, so he knows, he's seen it, man, and it was a little enlightening. Like I said, it kind of everything we knew already, but it's just amazing that there are people that watched those media sources that he was talking about that just still believe those narratives that were pushed. Man, the big one, like we mentioned with the Kyle Rittenhouse thing, whether you agreed with what he did or not, it's still the fact that they led you to believe he was out there slaughtering black people.
Absolutely.
And they just ran with it. They didn't technically say it, but they didn't do anything when they knew that was the opinion that was going around.
Yeah, because if they weren't white, there would have been pictures of every victim the day it got reported for the first time. There'd have been pictures of the victims up there.
No, that's true. That's true. What did Matt say? Isn't Bill Cosby dead? I don't know. He ain't dead.
Well,
no.
CSR said Bill Cosby lost a $50 million court case.
I did see that. Yeah, they sued him. That man. I want to say that poor man. He's he's part of my childhood. So you hate to see people like that in a criminal mindset. But I guess he is what he was. He apparently running around drugging women and doing whatever the fuck he was doing. But I know they he's out of prison. He's on fucking probably home arrest, whoever the fuck they're doing with his old ass now. But yeah, he's gonna lose between civil lawsuits. He'll die broke. Yeah. He was worth a fortune before all this happened. So, but hey, man, you can't run around drugging women and doing what you please with them. There's consequences to it. So
there sure the fuck is. But he found out.
Yes, he did. He did. But what else? CSR got all the news. Let me see what's going on in the chats. He's not in Trump's cabinet. No, he's not. Yeah, I'm it's been hard. Not that I go on this whole let's defend Trump stuff because we don't owe Trump anything. But when you do vote for somebody, you try to at least defend you're voting for him, but then when he's doing shit like he's doing right now, it makes it pretty hard with this Iran shit, dude.
It really does.
I don't know. I don't get it, man, and I really don't see it ending anytime soon. But anyway, let's see. I'm just scrolling X. I don't see anything really fucking just groundbreaking. What else? That's about it. All right. Well, tired of wasting time. Let's get off of here. Y'all have a good night. We appreciate y'all checking us out. CSR, Matt, Paul, all of you guys, we appreciate it for sure. And we'll be back Friday talking a little shit. See what kind of news develops before then. But anyway, we'll be back at it. And we appreciate y'all checking it out. Until next time, y'all be good. Justin, tell them bye.
Bye.